Jakub Dziwisz is the CEO and founder of Orbify, a company that is trying to simplify the process of building Earth observation solutions. What they're trying to do is basically allow users to build something a lot faster with no or low code and then charge people quickly. Effectively, what they're trying to do is bring the SaaS, software as a service, model to Earth observation. We talk about how things like Shopify have done this in the e-commerce world, where you can basically build a website in just a few clicks and in a few minutes and start having paying customers quickly. That's what they want to do, but for the Earth observation field. Jakub does have experience in the e-commerce world and in travel tech. So we talk about how his experience in travel, where you used to have to call a travel agency, wait for them to give you a price, and just basically take whatever they would give you, and how this is a little bit the case in the Earth observation industry today, where we have long, complicated customer experiences to get imagery and aren't unclear on things like price and how to get it. We also talk about this notion of self-service and how that has changed the travel world and might also change how Earth observation is done. This is one of those conversations that got me thinking for a while after our recording, mostly because I think Jakub is taking a different approach to Earth observation than we might be used to in the field. I'm particularly interested in people who come in Earth observation from different fields and bring their own experiences and ideas into the status quo of what Earth observation is today. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. I'm pretty excited to announce that the Radiant Earth Foundation have become a sponsor of the podcast. You might have heard on previous conversations that we mentioned STAC, the Spatial Asset Temporal Catalog, and the Radiant Earth Foundation. The foundation helps support developments of things like that. They also support machine learning practitioners in Earth observation by providing open access geospatial data and models. Right now, they're accepting nominations for the 2022 Radiant ML Hub Impact Award. So if you're doing anything with geospatial for Africa, agriculture related, you can apply for a chance to win a $5,000 prize in cash. You can find all the links to that and in Radiant Earth Foundation in the show notes. I'm also pretty excited because the podcast is sponsored by Element 84. They're a geospatial software engineering company that's focused on large-scale products. One of the cool things they've done is put the Sentinel-2 imagery on the AWS Open Access program. Dan Pallone, their CEO, has also been on the podcast before, so you can find it on episode 16. You can check it out, as well as their link to their website in the show notes. To round it off, you can find me on Twitter at MaxLearnement, or follow the news of the podcast at Minds Behind Maps, or you can find links to the previous episode and show notes on the website at mindsbehindmaps.com. With all of that said, here's my conversation with Jakub Dziwisz. All right, Jakub, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. I'm pretty excited about this conversation. As you know, I like to start these conversations with the same question every single time, so I'd like to ask it to you. I'd wonder, how would you describe yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Max, for having me here. It's a great pleasure, great honor to be on your webcast. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've listened to many great conversations that you had in the past. They were always entertaining, and I'm a bit anxious how this one will go. But well, you are a great interviewer, great podcaster, so I'm looking forward to it. Anyways, about myself, I would characterize myself as a problem solver, and probably this is one of the things that was always guiding me through my career. Then I would say that I'm rather an introvert. I don't like talking about myself, so this is one of the things that make me a little bit nervous about this podcast. And then I'm also a technical guy, a programmer. I used to be a programmer. I right now not coding that much, but I dabbled a little bit with technology, and all in all, I think I ended as a leader. So probably those four things: problem solver, technical guy, introvert, and a leader.
So what led you to becoming a leader? Because from what you said previously, like, you were doing more of the programming. Like, how do you move from that towards doing more of the leadership position, which is kind of a big change, especially if you do consider yourself as an introvert. It's not necessarily what everybody wants is to be under the spotlight as well, which comes from the leadership positions.
I think it was about solving problems. So the first thing, right? And actually, when I was in my first real job, still when studying, it was a startup. It was like, I don't know, a couple of people on the startup, and I realized that our founder doesn't have much, I don't know, attention time for managing the team, for coordinating things. So I realized that the best way to apply my time with the company, the best way to help the company grow, is actually to coordinate how we work. And then when the next opportunity came up, it was also somewhere where I realized that I can simply help people to work better together, to together build solutions that make more sense for the customers. So I was going farther and farther away from hardcore programming, unfortunately, something that I really liked as a kid, and was ending more as a guy that talks to others.
So it sounds like it's opportunistic. It's about like the thing that you want the most is to solve the problem, and that started with your programming, but then you saw there were other issues, bottlenecks, and so you took it upon yourself to try to fix those. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is why I started programming, right? So it was way back in the 90s. We didn't have all those fancy interfaces. I didn't have that many fancy games. So I was thinking, well, I will learn myself how to code, and then I will write amazing games. I learned myself to code a little bit. I still couldn't write amazing games, create amazing games, but coding was something that gave me a lot of fun, for sure, and allowed to solve some problems along the way as well. So it's about making impact.
So what happens there after? Like you go from you start coding some games. Do you remember any of the ones that you've made by any chance?
Well, it was super simple things, right? We are back in 1990s, so this is not 2010, 2020 when you have amazing toolkits that help you do this. It was like a squash game. There is a paddle and there is a ball, everything in ASCII art, and you need to hit the paddle, the ball with the paddle, and then it goes like this. So that kind of games. Nothing really fancy. No Cyberpunk, no Witcher, nothing like this.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah, and so can you help me understand what happens after that? So you start learning it, from what I understand, kind of on by yourself, and then that turns into your career. Like, what are the first kinds of jobs that you get started, and then how does your career start?
So I started, like more or less like you said, right? I started learning myself, reading books. There was no internet available in Poland at the time, so it was mostly about reading books, magazine, trying things, spending long hours in front of the computer. Then I started studies, computer science studies, where I had a chance to program a little bit more and learn from many smart people, both among professors but also students, right? It's something really cool when you are studying with lots of other smart people. You can learn from them, and these were the beginnings. So studying and part-time jobs, one here, one there. This is all that led me to, on the one hand, understanding how to be a decent solo programmer, but also to understand how much more you can accomplish when you work in a team. And even working on projects during studies, I realized, okay, together with a couple of smart guys, we're able to create certain things that I would never be able to create myself.
Right. And so I'm guessing that's like an important lesson, like when you start realizing that, oh, if you start working with other people, there's a lot more that you can do as an individual. I'm sure we'll get back to that a little bit later. Can you tell me about the first jobs that you had, like after your studies?
So during studies, it was about grid computing. It was theoretical
Okay.
branch of what is currently called cloud computing. Right, grid computing was about running software somewhere in a network of machines connected together with some software. So it sounds more or less like current cloud computing. It was early 2005 for something like this. But then I decided to switch industries, and I started working for Sabre. Sabre is an American corporation that creates travel technology, booking software, reservation software, software for airlines, software for travel agencies, websites where you can book your travel. So it was pretty much everything revolving around travel tech. And actually, travel tech is something where I stayed for over a dozen years. So more than half of my professional life is related to travel tech.
Right. And so let's go there a little bit. What happens for you to go from travel tech, which is like there's the computer science aspect, which can then be applied to pretty much any field, which is one of the really interesting things about it, is that once you know how to program in a certain language, like the field you can
Mm-hmm.
apply it to is very vast. So how come you stayed in the same field for so long? I feel like a lot of people like try out a lot of things. Is it because the travel aspect you were really interested in? Is it because the companies you were working in were great? Or is it that there's no specific reason?
I think both, or all of those reasons that you stated. On the one hand, yeah, I had a chance to work in really interesting companies. Sabre or AirHelp are really cool places to work. And the other thing is that travel is solving many real problems, right? If we travel, we learn about the world, we learn about other people, we become more tolerant to other cultures. So this is one aspect of this, right? Making world a better place through travel. Then travel is about leisure. It's about seeing new places. It's about simply enjoying life. Back in 2019, we all were traveling much more than we are traveling nowadays, and it was something that we're looking forward. I don't know, for maybe even whole year, right? I returned from one longer trip, and I'm looking forward to another longer trip. So travel is essential. Travel makes us better people. Travel makes world a better place.
But what made you want to stay working in that field? I think there's a difference sometimes between like going for a trip and then wanting to work specifically in that field, like on a day to day with all the ups and downs that come with it.
Mhm.
Was it something specifically about maybe the technical aspect that was leading you to stay in there, or was it something else?
Well, technology is of course interesting, because if you think about millions of passengers traveling every day. If you think about all potential connections that they could take, if you think about all reservations, be
Mm.
it hotel or airline reservations, this is a huge space, right? And optimizing this space is really challenging from a technical point of view. This is one thing, but the other thing is that there are many interesting problems that you can be solving while being in travel industry, and this is something that you can be proud of, right? I'm not sure if I could be proud of maybe not, let me not go into criticizing something that certain people may be super proud, right? But there are certain things
But
that
for
I could
you,
be
at
doing.
least, it was not like the thing that that's the thing that you were proud of, at least personally.
there are certain things in life that I might be doing, and I would say, "Oh, this is just a job," and I wouldn't be able to be proud about this. But I can be proud of what we accomplished in Air Help, where we were helping passengers to get compensation for delayed, cancelled flights. We were able to change a little bit in how airlines think about planning their routes, how they reach passengers, how they talk to passengers, how they communicate with passengers, how they treat passengers. So these are things that I'm definitely proud of.
Right. Yeah. That makes
and
sense.
And then actually there is another thing, Max. So when you compare how travel was looking back in 1990s and how it's looking nowadays, there is a huge shift. And actually, this shift was made possible through technology. So back in 1990s, if you wanted to fly somewhere, I'm not sure if you remember those really all the days, but you would have to probably go to a travel agency, say, "Hello, my name is Max, I'm thinking about flying somewhere," and then an agent would say, "Okay, Max, well, you can fly to here and here. This ticket will cost you 1,000 euro, and this ticket will cost you 2,000 euro. So which one you prefer," right? So on the one hand, your options are limited because you've got only another human that you are talking to, and especially if you're like me, an introvert, right? You don't enjoy that much talking to other people, so you're like, okay, let's be done with this really quickly, and I will just take the first option they proposed to me. The other aspect is that travel was expensive. I remember that myself, the first flight I took was in 2004, because if you wanted to fly from Krakow anywhere to Western Europe, it would cost you probably more than 600 euro. It was expensive. Today, if you want to fly, it's 20 euro. So this is the other aspect. One aspect is accessibility. So today you open a website, Skyscanner, Kayak, Expedia, whatever, right? And you select, okay, maybe here, let me check. Maybe I will not fly from Krakow, but from another airport. Maybe I'm not flying from London Stansted, but from Heathrow. And you can experiment with a lot of options easily, right? This is one aspect. And the other aspect is that prices went down. And actually, this was made possible by technology. Because in late 1990s, internet was mature enough. Internet was a thing that is big enough that there were first online travel agencies that were being built. Expedia was among the first, and then Hotwire was, I think, the other first online travel agency. And people were able to start booking trips themselves. And then airlines noticed, okay, you may have people booking directly, so they started spinning off their own websites. Also, low-cost airlines were able to spin up their own low-cost websites. So there were more and more websites made available for people. It enabled creation of some low-cost airlines, additional low-cost airlines, because you didn't have distribution agreement with a GDS, you didn't have a distribution agreement with a travel agencies. You could just say, okay, here I am, book my planes, right? And this made this whole revolution possible, that today, if you want to fly, you just pay with your credit card 30 euro, 40 euro maybe, and you can be in any place in Europe you want. So this is beautiful. This is something that to a small extent I helped creating. And when we will be talking about Earth observation, I think that this is also something that we would like to see, that people through self-service, ordinary people through self-service, through using really powerful tools can make better decisions on daily basis.
Yeah, I think you stole my transition. I was kind of
I'm
going
sorry.
for that. No, it's okay. But I think that's a really good transition to the whole Earth observation field today. When you were talking about what it's like in the 90s, where you go see someone whose job it is to actually see what you can have, and you have to go through an intermediate. You can't see the price up front. You don't really know what you're getting. That does sound a little bit like what we have today in the Earth observation field.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into what you are trying to do today to solve that, is that the reason why you got interested in the Earth observation field in the first place? Like, did you notice that there was this problem and you were like, oh, I've solved this before in a completely different field. This seems like something that needs the same kind of problems. Or did you get introduced to Earth observation through something completely different?
No, actually, this was pretty much this path, right? So I started talking to a couple of friends who are really experienced with Earth observation, and they saw this problem. They saw the problem that they are, for example, running a consulting company, Earth observation consulting company. People are reaching out to them, asking, "Hey, can you prepare a report on this or that for me?" And through their experience, expertise, they can prepare such a report. But then the customer comes back, they ask questions, and it's a long, ongoing process that. Well, it's interesting, right? Because you meet a lot of interesting people, you have a lot of interesting conversations, but all in all, it may start being tedious for both sides. So I had a couple of conversations like, "Hey, you are this well-known CTO of this well-known B2C company, so could you help me build this or that product for my company that would make it possible for my customers to self-serve themselves? I would like to have a website where my customers log in, they select area of interest, and then they start monitoring a given area." And this is something that actually occurred a couple of times in conversations that I had across a couple of months. And this made me realize, this made me start thinking about, hey, well, it's a repeating problem.
Did you have some specific use case in mind that you were trying to solve back at the time? Like, how did that conversation get started about finding there was a problem?
Mm-hmm. So one of the use cases was about monitoring dark vessels, and monitoring dark vessels is a classic problem, but to do it well is a challenge, right? So we want to understand whether there are any dark vessels in a given area, because they might be involved in illegal, unregulated fishing, and illegal, unregulated fishing leads actually to extinction of whole populations or even species of sea animals. 30%, I think 30% of the seafood we are eating comes from illegal fishing. So it's a really big problem. Then there are many people, many companies that are trying to take a stab at this problem. And one of entrepreneurs that I was lucky enough to talk to was thinking about building a web portal where environmental activists, ecologists can track illegal fishing, or dark vessels, right? And when understanding that there's a concentration of dark vessels, then maybe they can bring it to the attention of authorities and ask them to do something about it. So it's one of the use cases that's triggered my thinking towards, hey, there is a repeating problem in this area.
Is that just I'm still just trying to understand how you personally got interested in that. Is it because like you try to keep an eye on like multiple different segments and verticals and technologies? Like is that how you just it's a conversation that came up multiple times and that started catching your attention?
Well, in parallel, so while working at my previous company, in parallel, I started being even more fascinated with space. Space is something that was always on my mind, right? As a kid, watching Star Trek movies or Star Wars, I think I might have offended fans of both, right? You probably cannot be fan of both. So I'm more of a Star Wars fan, but still I think that Star Trek is piece of good cinema. Anyways, so it was always somewhere on my mind, but Then in late 2021, I started thinking that, well, travel industry is not booming anymore, right? We are traveling less, and this space thing, actually, it is booming. It is developing really quickly. There are many interesting things that are happening. So maybe this is somewhere where I could do something interesting, do something relevant. And I was observing many things happening in space, most often with awe and amazement, watching SpaceX accomplishments, watching Blue Origin and other amazing companies. And I was thinking, hey, how could I help, right? How could I make a difference here? And then Earth observation appeared as something where actually I could apply my B2C experience, product focus, and make it a bit more user-friendly, accessible.
So you start seeing there's a problem. And also because, 2021 is not the greatest year ever for travel. Which makes sense. And so how do you go from there seems to be a problem here to starting a company and trying to address that specific problem?
So it was, I think, classic to what Richard Branson said, another amazing space entrepreneur, who once said something that when you see people having a problem, and when you see this problem repeating often, and when you find a way to solve this problem, then you have a business idea. So seeing that there is repeating problem of building accessible, interactive solutions that turn Earth observation and geospatial data into insights, actionable insights that ordinary people can use to make better decisions. I realized that this is something that could be addressed, could be solved, especially given my travel tech or e-commerce perspective, because I also spent a couple of years in the e-commerce area. And to use another analogy, because we were talking about this travel industry analogy and how self-serving make a great change, then to use another analogy, there is Shopify. With Shopify, you can start your own e-commerce store within minutes, right? So you register yourself. You are saying, okay, I will be selling t-shirts. You've got a couple of photos of the t-shirts you are selling. You upload it. You assign prices, and off you go. This is a great change in comparison to what was going on in the industry 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you would have to program your own e-commerce store yourself, maybe even using C language, ANSI C. So, old times before PHP got popular. But this is how things like Amazon got started. They didn't have Shopify to build things. They had to write pretty much the whole thing from scratch. And then Shopify gives you CMS, so you can put some content, you can write descriptions, you can easily upload photos. You don't need to write to Visa or MasterCard and ask them for permission to process credit cards, because Shopify gives you a nice integration with Stripe, so you don't need to worry about anything. Shopify gives you this or that, right? Then there is another great company from this space, Squarespace, that does pretty much this, right? So with Squarespace, you can just create entire web presence for your e-commerce store, Magento and other players. So all of they do is to make it easier for someone to do their business. And with Earth observation, you probably know it even better than myself. If you want to build a product, then you need to harness a lot of dependencies from totally different domains. So one of the first problems you will be facing is integrating with satellite imagery providers, and signing a contract may take half a year, right? So this is a first stopper when you want to build a product that's from the time you start working on the product to the moment where you sign a deal, it will with satellite imagery provider, it will take a couple of years, but a couple of months. But then you will have to take care of software that is processing the imagery. Maybe it will be some sort of machine learning stuff or whatever.
Yeah, there's
and
a
this
lot
is
of
something
overhead.
completely different. And this is something completely different than front-end part, right? Because front-end is React, is fancy, is colorful. So if you are a guy who understands this imagery processing, most likely you didn't have that much time to focus on the front-end side. And Google got us used to the fact that super complex problem of browsing terabytes of data, searching for the most suitable website for you, right, boils down to a super nice interface, one text box, and you write down your query, and boom, within seconds you've got an answer. With Amazon, super complex problem of selecting best, watch to buy boils down to 2 clicks. Okay, these are the recommended watches for you. I like this one, and boom, all the complexity of selecting interesting watches that might be interesting for your taste, then selecting which store is the most optimal for your case, then processing payments, etc., etc. All of this complexity is hidden from you, right? And we as consumers got used to the fact that super complex things are presented to us in a very nice way. So this is something that we as consumers also expect in our professional life. So this is why Slack, this is why Zoom, right, are now so hyped companies, because it's not that Zoom invented video calls. There was WebEx. There were other products that made it possible to do a video over web. But Zoom was accessible. Zoom was easy to use. This is why everyone is using Zoom right now.
Let me interrupt. Sorry. So I'm I want to stay on that thought, and so I think we're painting the picture about what you guys are trying to do. Could you explain to me in a few sentences maybe what Orbify is trying to do from all that stage that we've set here about some of the different industries? I'm curious as to then what's the approach that you guys are trying to take at Orbify for the Earth observation sector specifically.
Yeah, let me try. So Orbify makes it easy for innovators, entrepreneurs to build Earth intelligence applications. Earth intelligence applications are user-friendly, interactive solutions that turn Earth observation and geospatial data into actionable insights that ordinary people can use to make better decisions on a daily basis.
So sorry to interrupt again. There, you said something I want to come back to that I've been really curious about, is the ordinary people aspect of that. So what you're trying to do is boil down this complicated data field of the amount of data that we have and trying to solve problems. Why do you believe that it also is about ordinary people? That's the thing that I would like to understand. What is in it for the ordinary people in order to access that imagery? What's the need that needs to be solved?
This is a very good question. Thank you for asking. And probably ordinary people are not interested in imagery. They are interested in insights, right? So Orbify is not per se a web platform for everyone. Orbify is a platform for innovators, entrepreneurs that want to build solutions for ordinary people.
Okay.
So this is our take on this. So
is that a little bit like how Shopify is not for everybody, but it's for the people who want to build the websites that sell to everybody?
Yes, exactly. So this is really good analogy. Thank you, Max, for this. So ordinary people are the decision makers. This could be a forester that wants to understand what is the condition of the forest that they are taking care of. Whether there is someone doing some illegal logging in the forest, whether trees are healthy. Ordinary person is a farmer that wants to understand whether the crops are healthy, right? And if the farmer owns a considerable piece of land, then they cannot go to every place themselves. So they would like to get some assistance. And if you are a corporation, if you are, I don't know, a buyer AG, right? Probably you have this assistance from space, from Earth observation data. But if you are a mid-size player, then probably you will not have a team of people using geospatial Earth observation solutions to build platforms for you. You would rather have a self-service tool that simply tells you, okay, soil moisture looks good, organic matter content, maybe you should put more fertilizer, and this way you will get better crops. Another ordinary person could be an environmental activist, ecologist that wants to understand if there is out of the sudden a lot of dark vessels in a given area, and maybe they are flocking in an area where actually you shouldn't be fishing in this time of the year. So maybe someone should be patrolling this area more often. These are the ordinary people we are talking about. These are the users of the solutions that our app builders are building on Orbify.
There's one thing I want to ask. When hearing from this, I recall some previous conversations and some things that I tend to hear usually in this Earth observation field is this moving towards specializing in one vertical, where companies will try to focus on agriculture, for example, and that will become their vertical, and they will work with data resellers like Planet, Pleiades, ISI, all these companies to partner with to work on that vertical because they understand the agriculture field domain better than the aggregator can. And then you have multiple different verticals like that one might be working in fishing, agriculture, as I said. It seems like what you're trying to do is to sort of undercut those people working in those verticals and directly get to the people to make it so easy to access that the people can directly solve their own problems. Am I getting that right? And what would you say to people who are thinking about it in terms of you need a vertical and you need to be specialized enough to be able to understand those people's needs?
We are actually helping the people that are building the end solutions, because they can use Orbify as an infrastructure to build their solution on top of Orbify. So I think that if you are let's say, if you are not a technical guy, if you are not a guy who is some sort of a hacker, then probably you will not be able to build your own crop monitoring application on top of Orbify. We make it easy for people that understand agriculture, for people that understand this domain to build their applications. We give them infrastructure, we give them tools. And actually, when we started the conversation, Max, you said something like that people working in IT tend to change industries frequently, because when you learn programming, it's like, well, there is not a huge difference between fintech and I don't know, e-commerce. And to big extent, you are right. Of course, if you want to get deep into industry, if you want to understand the problems, if you are interested in the product side, then differences are huge. But well, Python is Python, Java is Java, and if you are only interested in the engineering part, then this might be pretty versatile. And similarly, in case of Earth observation, yes, if there is a huge difference between a crop monitoring application and an application that monitors landslides. At the same time, when you are talking about infrastructure for this application or the user interfaces, there are a lot of similarities, right? So you will have both of them, most likely. This is third decade of 21st century, so there will be browser-based applications. Then probably you will want to display some sort of a map. Probably you will want to display some vector data, some raster data on that map. Probably you will need to display some data as charts, because it's not only about colors on the maps, but sometimes it's about diagrams. Sometimes it's about exporting stuff to CSV. Sometimes it's about JSON REST integration. Most likely, and these are the user interface things. But then when we are looking at the backend, most likely we'll need cloud infrastructure to support your computations, because when you're analyzing satellite imagery, those files can be a couple of gigabytes big, right? And if you are doing some sort of time series analysis, then you will need several images like this. So a laptop will not be enough to run a product on. A couple of EC2s on Amazon probably will not be enough. If you will rent EC2s, then you will pay a lot for the moments where those machines are idle, right? So you will need to create an infrastructure that on demand allocates resources for your computations. And then same about storage, etc., etc. So there is really interesting
problems to
solve, really interesting domain related to cloud computing for Earth observation purposes. And actually, we treat it really seriously. We built a very powerful engine that on demand allocates resources for our platform and releases them when they are not needed, right? And then there are things like we mentioned Shopify and their integration with Stripe. This is what we provide as well. So we make it easy for our users to start charging their customers, because at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur, then you will want to make money on your solution. We make it easy to have this farmer put their credit card, and then every month you as app builder charge the farmer with, I don't know, small fee, be it 20 euro, but 20 euro times 100 is already 1,000 euro. This is already something, right? So
this is something that sounds pretty exciting, is about turning that into a consumer-facing product. I think it's something that we haven't seen that much of. I think the thing that comes to mind for me when I hear you talking about that is Google Earth Engine. It doesn't have the commercial aspect of it, and there's a case to be made that the use cases are very different. And I wonder how you see what Google Earth Engine does compared to what you're trying to do, just in general.
Google Earth Engine, in general, Google Earth Engine is amazing, right? This is something that really impressed me a lot when I first saw it. At the same time, Google Earth Engine is not something that I would give to my father and tell him, hey, this is how you can monitor grass in your parcel, right? I could give to my father. Actually, I tested with my father one of our applications where you are doing oil spill analysis, and this application, oil spill analysis application that I built for my dad as some sort of a demo, has really simple Google Maps-like interface where you select a polygon and say, hey, let's see whether there were any oil spills here between this and that date. And this is everything. So you cannot really break this application. The application doesn't ask you to create any sort of code or anything like this. It's just select an area of interest and then I will do analysis for you. That's it. So Google Earth Engine is amazing. Google Earth Engine is something that we could use as a backend for our platform to do some computation analysis. But Google Earth Engine is not something that I would give to a person that is not, well, at least technical a bit when it comes to Earth observation.
It sounds to me like one of the big issues that you need to think about, not issues, but challenges, let's put it that way, that you guys need to think about is the user interface. Because when we're talking about democratizing this type of data that's been very in a bubble. I don't know how else to put it. It's been
Hmm.
like at some point the amount of people who know how to use a satellite image, to know where to get it, to process it, to answer those questions that we're talking about is very reduced. Um,
Yeah.
so, what's the amount of effort that you're putting into the user experience and the user interface?
This is very important to us, and we have a couple of front-end developers on our team who are experienced with React, with translating difficult problems into easy user interface. Also, like I mentioned, I come from B2C background, right?
Yeah.
So for me, as a manager leader, it was always important to build applications that are user friendly. Same about one of our co-founders, Michał, who is responsible for the product side of Orbify. He's well, we work together at our help, right? So he was also involved in building solutions that are to be used by ordinary people, to stick to this expression, and he was putting a lot of effort always to make them usable, accessible. So definitely this is important. And what if I may go back a little bit to what you said at the beginning of this question, I agree with you that when it comes to people from our domain, there are a lot of great tools like Google Earth Engine that make their lives simple, right? So this is not what we are trying to do, because we acknowledge that there are a lot of platforms that make it easier for Earth observation scientists to make decisions, to prepare reports. We want to make for those people easy to build applications for the end user decision makers, ordinary people.
Right. I want to move on a little bit, and I'm quite curious as to
Mm-hmm.
how you're thinking about the business model of what you're trying to do. This is something I'm less familiar with, so the question tends to be a lot more simple. But I'm trying to, like, if you were to summarize, is it also trying to take an approach like Shopify, where you're trying to just spread it over everybody that takes that works with what you're producing, and then you just centralize that? You were talking about an engine. Is that how you want to subsidize that in a way, by having all those different segments of people that pay through a fee, something like that? I'm just quite curious to understand that side.
Mm-hmm. We are using SaaS model to
Right.
price what we are delivering, and actually, we there is this saying that good artists copy, great artists steal. We are stealing, we are inspiring ourselves with the pricing model that Amazon applies. So when you look at it, Amazon is offering you infrastructure. We are also offering infrastructure to people building Earth observation solutions, and they are pricing their solutions using usage metrics like CPU time, like transfer gigabytes, and this is also what we are tracking. So the more resources you use, the more you will pay, and this is. I think this is really fair, because if you want to experiment, if you are, let's say, a student that wants to just try and write the first application, then you will not have to pay anything. Orbify, for a start, gives some free credits, and then if the application is not being used frequently, then the charges will not be big. While if you build something that is being used by a lot of people, then, well, it incurs some costs for Orbify, and this is where you as app builder also need to start paying a bit more. But we want to make it accessible, we want to make it affordable for everyone to start with Orbify, just like Shopify or
One of
just like
the
Amazon.
one of the things that comes to mind to me when talking about SaaS, so software as a service in the Earth
Mm-hmm.
observation field, is the fact that there's also one of the big inputs is data. And so there's people who've talked about insights as a service and data as a service. I wonder how you think about the fact that you need to get the data, and it's still not really well standardized. People talk about whether or not it's a commodity. How does that compare to lending the infrastructure that AWS does? How does the data come into play when you're thinking about doing a SaaS model?
Mm-hmm. We are talking to multiple constellations, multiple providers of satellite imagery. And on the one hand, it's really nice. It's really nice to see that they are open to working with us. They are not saying, "Oh, we will never sell our data to platform like yours." So this is really great, and I'm super happy that the industry here is so open to innovation. At the same time, you are right that an image is not equal to an image, right? And even if you are talking about optical imagery, or not to mention SAR, then there are lots of factors that come into play. So it's not as easy as say, okay, this is my area, and just give me any pictures and I will use them. But this is something that is on the app builder to decide what type of data they need. Well, to stick to some examples, if you are creating a vessel detection app, then most likely you are not very picky when it comes to data, right? Because vessel is a vessel. Maybe if you have better resolution, then you will have overall better recognition results. But it's not that critical what sort of data you are using, depending on quality of your observations, etc. Right. On the other hand, if you are building an algorithm that is to establish, I don't know, soil organic matter content in the soil, then it is super critical. What data, what sensors are you using? And in such a case, as an app builder, you will probably say, well, I'm using only data from this particular constellation because this is what I trained my model with. But this is on the app builder to decide whether they are saying, okay, the best temporal resolution we can get. So my algorithm is not... my algorithm can accept all types of data and just give me any sort of SAR image of the area and I will take advantage of it. Or maybe I need very specific information only from this constellation.
So, sorry, when you say
the question?
Up builder, is it the Orbify customer who's then working with consumers?
Exactly. So the terminology that we are using is that app builder is a person that creates this Earth intelligence application, and then there is app user, a person, the end user of the application.
And can you...
So app builder is someone that knows a little bit about Earth observation usually.
Right. Do you feel comfortable telling me about like any customers that you have today and what they might be doing and what the use cases are, and then who their customers are? Just trying to get an example of who you might be working with.
So I think I can mention a couple of companies. One of them is actually a French-Polish company, Apsiski. I'm not sure if you've heard about these guys. So we are working with them on one application for air quality monitoring.
Okay.
And this is one of our test cases where we are simply working with them as app builders to understand what their needs are, how we can best assist them. We are learning a lot from this cooperation. So air quality monitoring with satellite, but also with in-situ measurements is a really interesting thing because by combining in-situ measurements that are, well, there is many sensors, multiple sensors, a lot of sensors in the cities, but then in less dense populated areas, there rarely are any sensors. And then when you combine in situ measurements with satellite observations, this can give you much better insight into what is the concentration of gases like O3, like methane, over large areas. So this is one of the use cases that we are implementing on the platform.
And then who are the customers of those people? Like, who are they trying to then work with?
This would be environmental organizations, ecologists.
Right.
This might be government agencies that also want to better understand what is the situation close to their cities. Maybe this could be even ordinary, people like you and me that want to understand: can I go out today,
Right.
or should I
Gotcha.
stay inside? So the nice thing about building applications so easy is that they become less expensive. So if you have this integration with Stripe, PayPal, then actually you don't need to have a multi-million dollar contract in place to give someone access. You can say, okay, pay me $20 every month, and
Right.
that's fine. This is sufficient. This is the future that we would like to see. That you can subscribe to Earth observation products, tools, as easily as today you can subscribe to, I don't know, weather forecast.
Yeah. Yeah, which in a way is also like you could argue is based on some Earth observation, so it might be one way to
Oh, of
do
course,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to ask you as well, moving along a little bit, is you mentioned that you started working in this in 2021, so around last year, and you have this experience of B2B and e-commerce. I'm really curious as to when you started working in like implementing those solutions, were there things that like struck you on how things are done today in Earth observation, coming from that background of B2C and e-commerce? A lot of, just to add a bit of more context around that question, I think a lot of people come from different fields working in Earth observation. But at least personally, I hear a lot about the technical aspect, and I'm really curious to what your experience has been like seeing the niche a little bit of Earth observation. Has there been something where you were like, oh, why aren't we doing things like that? Or, oh, this is really clever. Is there anything that comes to mind on that?
Well, first of all, there are many very smart, intelligent people in this domain, and this is a great thing because I can learn a lot from them. The other great thing is, I think, something that I alluded to a little bit earlier on, that people are in general open. It feels a little bit like a student community more than hardcore sharks swimming, business sharks, trying to make business, which is also something really cool, something that I very much appreciate and enjoy. And at the same time, I think that the state of hardcore technology being used in Earth observation is maybe like 10 years ago in travel tech, maybe 15 years ago. So I don't see cloud computing being that dominant in this area. I still hear a lot from people that want to run their software on their computer. I have a server somewhere at my university, and this is where I want to keep my stuff running. I'm afraid of this cloud thing because I don't know where it is, right? So this is one of the things that is surprising to me.
Okay.
One of the things that in e-commerce, in travel tech, probably is something that ended up in mid 2010.
Right.
Tens. So this is one of the things. The other thing is that since people are smart, everyone is accustomed to complex user interface.
Right.
And we are going back again and again to this topic, but when you look at Spotify, to not stick to always the same names, right? When you look at Slack, when you look at Google Docs, the user interface is really sleek, really easy to use, and even if this is workplace software, then still it's something that is very enjoyable to use. And here, people are smart. So they figure out complex user interface. They figure out how to use complex user interface. But actually, maybe this is this curse of knowledge that we know a lot about the industry and we can learn. But it means that it's not easy for newcomers to start here. And I know that it's newcomers will not implement new algorithms of SAR, satellite imagery analysis, but newcomers can be the guys that simply build tools for others. Newcomers could be people who use those tools.
Do you think there's a way to keep a fresh eye as you dig deeper into a field? How do you think you can do that as an individual? Because the more you start digging, the more you're part of those people who have that tunnel vision.
Well, we are hiring at Orbify, and we are hiring people that have Earth observation experience. We need to have people that understand the domain really well. At the same time, the front-end engineers that we are hiring, in 2 months from now, Vlad is joining us. Vlad is a guy who hasn't been working earlier on in Earth observation, has no PhD in geophysics. He's got experience with B2C stuff. So we are hoping that he will keep us like you said, he will make that us looking with fresh pair of eyes on those problems.
Was that a like deliberate hire on like we want someone who doesn't have experience in Earth observation?
To some extent, definitely yes. We are looking for people that have specific technical skills, and sometimes it's very difficult to be a specialist in everything. Yeah. So when you are a great specialist in Earth observation processing satellite imagery, then you simply might have not enough time to also follow the newest trends in React. Right, so that's why we've got a really nice mix of people in Orbify, and this is something that I'm really proud. And actually, our head of people and culture is making sure that we are diversified, that we are hiring people with different backgrounds, also ethnical backgrounds, because all in all, diversity is important, and it's something that helps us looking at problems with fresh eyes. Not only when it comes to Earth observation. It's about solving problems, about building distributed teams, about deciding about business strategy, pricing models, that kind of thing. So at all of those occasions, diversity helps a lot.
And one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning was like how much, like we talked about the programming path that you went through. And I always wonder on people who started doing programming and end up in more leadership positions or end up CEOs specifically. Do you miss programming? Do you still program a little bit on the side, or like what's your relationship with programming now?
So now I'm using my remaining technical skills to, for example, pull up some report of platform usage, right? So to connect to database and use SQL queries to understand better how people are interacting with the platform, what they are creating, how often they are doing this, how often they are struggling with specific problems. So, yes, it's helpful to have the background. Also, having the background helps me to understand the struggles that the team has, the problems that they are facing, and especially in my previous job when I was a CTO, it helped me a lot to explain to other executive leaders of the company why things are going this or that way, why it would be more important, or why we should be taking this or that business decision, right? So technical understanding definitely is important, but I myself don't consider to be a really good programmer anymore.
Right. But you still say like you still do SQL queries, so you still have a foot in the door on that side, right?
No, here in my browser, I've got not only Grafana and some SQL open, but also Jupyter Notebook with Earth Engine actually over there. So but it's more of a prototyping than actually doing something really production ready.
Yeah, I'm guessing the work changes a little bit from, if you're an engineer, like a software engineer, you need to make something that's really reliable versus having the skill to be able to mock something up really quickly to make an MVP. I'm guessing that also changes in what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even say that what I'm doing is a prototype. Maybe it's just a proof of concept.
Right.
Because
okay,
maybe
gotcha.
they're just tiny details, right? But actually, I'm lucky to be working with great engineers who can prototype many things really quickly. And when you look at when you look at Orbify right now, many of the features over there are more of a prototypes than actually a code that can handle years of usage. Because what I learned over years is that pretty often when you are building a new product, you make certain assumptions. People want this, so we need to create it this way. And then people start using it and you learn, hey, they are doing things completely differently. So actually, I will be really surprised if in a year from now, more than 50% of the code we are creating today will remain. I think that we will remove a lot of unused code, a lot of unused assumptions, but it's about testing things. It's about seeing what users need, how they are interacting with software, and if they do interact the way we want, then we can write this reliable code. But for now, it's more of a decent prototype. It works well very often, but if it doesn't, then well, we simply fix it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like that's my experience as well. That flexibility is very important early stage as well. Jakub, this has been a pretty cool conversation. I want to start rounding it off. You probably know this, but I also end the conversations with the same question. So I wanted to know if there was any books or podcasts. Again, I like asking about books and podcasts mostly because those are pretty hard to discover other than word of mouth. So if there's anything that you've read or heard recently that you think might be worth sharing, be it in geospatial or not, nonfiction, fiction, anything.
Well, when it comes to Earth observation, then there are two great podcasts, of course, Minds Behind Maps and the Mapscaping podcast. So here, I'm sorry, I will not surprise you. And you are very well aware of those two. But when it comes to books, well, recently I read a couple of interesting books. I love reading. So I think that it was Keith Masbeck who, at your podcast, recommended Space Barons, and this is a really great book. But actually, one I enjoyed even more was Case for Space by Robert Zubrin. I'm not sure if, Max, you had a chance to read it.
I know Zubrin. I've met him a couple times, but I haven't read his book.
So this one for me is super inspiring because it's like a little bit futuristic book showing a couple of directions we as humankind can take. So I really enjoyed this one. And when we are looking more general into leadership, then an amazing book is 9 Lies About Work. It's a book that has a very solid theoretical foundation. In general, I like books that are not written like, well, I'm a guy who succeeded and I will tell you how I did it, because it can be really interesting, entertaining, but it's not something that can be relied on as knowledge. And 9 Lies About Work is something that the authors did a lot of research. Actually, one of them is working in the Gallup Institute, and they research a couple of myths about work. For example, that people have potential. According to the authors, people don't have potential. But the other myth that they are talking about is that people need feedback. According to the authors, that people don't need feedback.
Okay,
so there are a couple of controversial things over there that really make sense when you read a book, and it changed the way I think it was recommended to me by our head of people and culture, and now I can recommend this to you and your listeners. And
that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I like the idea of like going against ideas that you might before at first. So I'll check that one out. That sounds pretty cool. Did you have anything in mind? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I think that's it. So, well, when it comes to podcasts outside of Earth observation, 20-minute VC by Harry Stebbings is also a great podcast if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship, VC investments, and the formula is a little bit similar to yours or Daniel's, where he interviews a lot of different people, so you can hear a lot of different opinions in 20 minutes. And because this is his trademark, that those podcasts are relatively short.
Yeah, that's not really what I do, but that sounds pretty good. Great, Jakub, thanks a lot for spending some of your valuable time with me. This has been a pretty fun conversation. I think what you guys are doing is definitely really interesting. So I look forward to seeing what comes out next.
Well, thank you, Maxim. It was great to talk to you. It's great to hear your opinions, feedback on what we are doing, and it's been a pleasure to be on the show.